Children and Young People's Evidence Session on the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Bill for the Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee, November 2023. Introductions.
Hi, I'm Omima. I'm from the Children's Parliament and I'm 14 years old.
I'm Arden and I'm 15.
Hi, I'm Safiyah and I'm 12.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm the Vice Chair of the Scottish Youth Parliament and the Member of the Scottish Youth Parliament for Glasgow Cathcart.
Question 1. What do you know about the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Bill as it was passed in March 2021? And what do you think other children and young people now think about the UNCRC Scotland Bill?
I know the UNCRC bill was set to be put into law, but got knocked back by the Supreme Court in England. And since then, the government has been trying to change it so it fits with our devolved government laws. So we're not outstepping our power to protect the kids. And I think not many kids actually know that it went. There wasn't a lot of publicity about it. I know most kids in my school didn't know about it. They didn't know about the UNCRC, never mind the law to get passed. I'm not sure if that's different for other people, but I know if I asked my friends what it was, they wouldn't know apart from me telling them.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Arden said, because especially about other young people and children knowing about their rights, because anybody that I've spoke to about their rights don't actually know that the children's rights are not incorporated into law yet. And they have just assumed that that is something that they should be having and that it would obviously be implemented into law because they're so important.
Children can understand it if it's explained in a way that they can process it.
I do think that there are a lot of children and young people, people like us in this space, who know a lot about the bill. And I think that us going and talking to our friends is sort of the small scale type of action that needs to happen to inform other children and young people about the bill.
Because it might be too powerful, because if we can't have the bill like that, then it might be a bit too hard for us to get a training for it for everyone. So I think the UK government would be like, nope. I said on TikTok and YouTube and social media like Snapchat and other ones like Instagram as well, but as well at schools, because they need to learn where they can contact if they're worried about their rights, and adults should learn about the children's rights on things like Facebook and X.
Question 2. Now that changes have had to be made to meet the UK Supreme Court judgment, are you worried that there might be areas where your rights aren't fully protected? If so, where do you think these gaps might be?
Definitely worried about what rights are going to be knocked back or adjusted according to the devolved government's laws. And the most terrifying part, I think, is I don't even know what areas of the rights that are like not going to be passed, or what areas are going to be pushed back. And I think that's really scary, because whenever I look at the UNCRC, I see each and every right as important and individual, and I don't really see how we could live without any of them. I think maybe the government could be a little bit more open, but I'm not sure how those regulations work. But I think maybe if we could be more informed about exactly how the UNCRC is being adjusted and what it's being adjusted to fit.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that the government could do to try and help this worry. I think that one is going through all of the laws which are no longer covered by the bill and working with children and young people to prioritise which laws should be trying to be brought into the scope of the bill. I think that through a form of a legislative audit, and I think that that's really important. And I also think that this bill is just the beginning, and sort of that culture change aspect is really more important now. And I think what would really put children and young people's minds at ease is that they think that adults are respecting their rights as something that is natural and not something that they're doing just because it's held up by law.
I agree. Like, I'm looking online, it's hard to find definite answers, and I know it's changing all the time, so it is hard to update and to show where it's going. But I think as well, something that worries me is the fact that not all regulations are working with the UNCRC. It seems crazy to me. I thought the purpose of putting UNCRC into law was to make sure it's respected, and now suddenly there's people are wondering, oh, like especially people like the police and things like that are there to protect us are wondering when they can disrespect our rights. And it seems it's a bit backwards, I guess. I would probably personally try and talk to someone, whether it was my parents or someone at school. But I know some kids, they don't have that connection with teachers at school or even with their parents or family. So I know some kids would go to look online. So I think it's having that knowledge where it's widespread, what is the UNCRC, how you can report if your rights are being breached, whether it's through school, an anonymous service online, or something like that. I think that's quite important to have it both ways. It should be clear online. Everyone should be able to find out what their rights are. It shouldn't be this big secret where you've got to read through loads of legal documents and read between the lines and check what regulations cover that. It should be clear cut.
I think it's important that schools especially are making it known to children and young people, not just, oh, what their rights are, because I think I was even more fortunate than most schools in Scotland when my primary school like showed us what our rights were. But even then, they did not tell us what that meant for us or how we could stand up for them or what we could do when when our rights were being breached. So I feel like it needs to be more widespread, especially in education, how children value their own rights before adults value their rights.
I think there should be like a children's rights website that like you could talk to someone and get advice, and then if it's really bad situation, like the rights agencies would come to the place and it could help make things better. And the website could have like a massive button that says complain, which would send like a message out. And then there would be like another one that says talk to us, and you get to talk to like a member, and all these would be easy to read for everyone.
I think that Safiyah's idea completely captures the need for information to be relayed in a way that's accessible to children and young people. And it's okay, I've got a quote from Bo, who's a fellow MSYP, on this topic, which is that she said it's essential that children and young people are communicated with in a child and youth friendly way to ensure they understand the protections this bill will give them, especially given the changes between this and the previous bill. And when we say in a child and youth friendly way, we mean that it is designed with children and young people. It must also be communicated in spaces that children and young people frequently visit, whether that be schools, youth clubs, and on social media. And that finally, communication should be accessible to all children and young people, making sure it is clear and easy to understand and on multiple formats so that everyone can access the information. And I think for me, that just really sums up how important it is that for children and people to be able to call out breaches to their rights being protected, that they have to first understand what their rights are and what it means for them.
I feel like a lot of the adults that are supposed to be teaching us about our rights, and namely the one thing that comes into mind are like teachers in this instance, they are not really their actions aren't as rights focused as I feel like they could be. A lot of the times they can be like patronizing in a way that kind of makes you feel like, oh, well, I'm the adult here and you're the child, so it doesn't really matter what you've got to say because in the end, it's just going to be up to me, whatever's happening. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like teachers need to take a step back and maybe look at their own actions from a rights-based perspective. And I feel like it should also be implemented and reminded into them for and like teacher training and stuff like that. I feel like it should always be there like, oh, remember this right means that you have to do this, because if you don't do this, then that's kind of your whole job. You know what I mean?
Something I would just add on to the culture change point is that I think in Scotland we're getting better at upholding and understanding children and young people's rights in the most obvious areas like education. But I think for real culture change, we need to be making sure that children and young people's rights are thought about in every area. So it's important for every adult to think about their role and how it impacts children and young people's rights, even if it's maybe not as directly as other people.
So I was just kind of thinking along the same lines that Ellie, like how although school is a huge place where children's rights needs to be on a focus, also different places in town, and whether that's shopkeepers, bus drivers, they also need to be aware of it. And whether that's providing a section in training as well as like teacher training, but training for anyone who's dealing with the public or through social media. I really like the idea of a website and sharing it on platforms like TikTok and Facebook and X. Because to be honest, I don't know one person that's not at least on one of those platforms. And I think it's a huge way where it's a huge resource to share information, even if it's a 5-10 second advert before a video. If it's just constantly there reminding people, then it does make people realize, and it does make people, think about children's rights when they're more. But I think also implementing it how it looks like, because children's rights, although they are in society, they're not really prevalent and people don't really think about them. And it's quite hard when you think what a rights-based society looks like.
I feel like there's not a lot of room for us to question the authority that is the school body and the teachers. And even if they are, disrespecting your rights and clearly like not allowing you to have even your basic human rights before your children's rights, there's not really a lot you can say to them without getting into trouble or seeming disrespectful, for want of a better word.
Question 3. What sort of changes do you think the UNCRC Scotland Bill will make to the lives of children and young people in Scotland? How soon do you think these changes might take place?
I think the change is definitely going to be gradual. But I think if it is up there and children are now aware, oh, my rights do matter enough to be put into law, then they're going to start like valuing themselves more and valuing the way that they're treated and the way that adults especially treat them. And I think that's just going to be a big, almost like pickup for our generation to make us feel as if we are heard and valued as people, not just as children.
It will be a gradual process, as Omima says, and I understand UNCRC, it impacts every aspect of children's lives, and also the people who are working with children and everyone in the street, because everyone has interactions with children in one way or another. So I understand it's a huge task to try and change everyone's lifestyle and to have it more involved in school curriculums, in the justice sector. And I know it will be gradual, but I do also hope that it's not too gradual. I do hope that we will start to see change, especially with the way they're trying to change the SQA and for the police sector, how they interact with kids. I hope that changes as well to a more positive way. So although I do understand it's going to be gradual, I think it's also important to think that this does need to change and it does need to happen and it does need to be a priority.
Even stronger that we need to create communications that are children and youth friendly and designed in a way that children and people can understand them, because I think that the idea that we don't understand it shouldn't be a, okay, they don't understand it, let's leave them out the conversation. It should be a, how do we actually create communications that mean that they understand it. So
I think it should be better for people who live in poverty, like young children and young people who live in poverty, and children should be treated fairly at school by teachers and pupils, especially the adults.
Yeah, I think in terms of how long the change is going to take, that it's really over to the Parliament and the government now to sort of create this implementation programme and really prioritise implementation of the bill. And although some of the long-term culture change will take a while, that change needs to start now. And that if we have a generation of children and young people who have their rights respected, they'll become adults who respect and value children's rights, and that will help the longer term culture change as well. And so that's why it's really important that although some of these changes might take a while to be implemented, that it starts as soon as possible.
What everyone was saying about having our rights plastered all over the place, like social media and things like that, I feel like that kind of stuff is not just for children to know about their rights, it's for adults as well, because adults don't really know. I feel really sort of depressed against saying this, but adults don't know much about children's rights and children don't know much about children's rights. So it's kind of like nobody really knows anything about children's rights at this point. And I feel like putting that into law is going to like solidify it and make it a proper thing that we can look at and on paper, because you know how adults like to look at stuff on paper. When you look at the stuff on paper and it's there, then you know it's there and it's not just an idea, it is a thing that is real.
I think maybe some teachers have more like more education on it. It'd be like it would depend like what, especially in high schools, I guess, what subject do you teach? Because if you teach like let's just say maths, you're not going to be really like up to date with your rights. But if you're like a guidance teacher or something, you would have more experience with that. But with after school clubs, it's normally volunteers. Well, the one I went to was just volunteers. So I think maybe it should just like be maybe more train people with their rights.
I really agree with Omima and the point she's saying. I feel like I'm always coming after teachers, though. I feel a bit bad, but they are the main people that we interact with that aren't our parents, I think, or our family. But I don't think it's from a lack of I'm trying to think of the right word, empathy or anything like that. I think it's just a lack of knowledge is the main thing. I feel like a lot of people think, oh, human rights, and a lot of people don't know about children's rights. But when you do say, oh, we have children's rights, it's a bit like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But people don't think of the repercussions of that and what that means in terms of day-to-day life, not just, oh, you can't hit a kid, how it impacts kids daily. And like Emma said, children don't know, adults don't know, no one really knows. I think it's easy for me to sit here and think, oh, it's quite popular because I am interested in this, and I was lucky enough to get opportunities to work with things like the UNCRC. But the truth is, majority of children don't. They go through like their entire childhood not knowing about this just from lack of knowledge, and as well lack of what it would look like. It's kind of taken as a given that, oh, you don't stand up to, like Mima says, authority. The police person tells you not to do something, like policeman or woman, you don't do it. And there's not, like, if the police told me not to do something when I was in my rights to do it, I genuinely don't know where I go, because, you know, you're taught to look up at the police as kind of like the almighty law, where they are police officers that do treat young people wrong and unfairly. And I would have no idea where to go if they did do that. So having more awareness of children's rights stops that instance of treating children wrong in the first place from even coming about as much. And as well on what happens after that, whether that's having a service or a website to complain.
Yeah, just to add on to a couple of points that have been raised, I think that if people are teaching about the UNCRC and then not upholding the rights, that children and people will lose trust in the fact that adults actually value their rights as opposed to something that they're just obliged to tell them about. And I think that when these conversations are happening, there should be an understanding of the fact that these rights are not a gift from adults and they're not something that can be taken away, and that this should be able to start a conversation that's two-sided between children, young people and adults, as opposed to just adults telling us what our rights are and what they mean for us.
So I really liked what Arden was saying, the example she'd given about like if a police officer or something like that disrespected children's rights, it's kind of hard to know where to go after that, because from my perspective, what are you supposed to do when the people who are supposed to be protecting you are the ones that are actually stopping you from being protected? And so it's kind of, it makes you feel sort of hopeless as a young person as a whole. And without the UNCRC, you do feel kind of hopeless as a young person because adults are the almighty hierarchy, and it feels sort of like it makes you shrink a little inside to feel like you're not as important or not as valued as someone who has had more years on this planet than you have.
Closing remarks.
It's really important just to emphasise that the bill is the beginning of a wider culture change that's needed, and I think that culture change should go alongside making sure children and young people are continued to be worked with on the bill and the implementation plan of the bill, because the consultation stage is really important, but it's also really important that with implementation that children and young people are continued to be kept up to date in ways that are accessible to them and brought into the conversations around what bills should be prioritised to be brought into the scope of the law. And stuff like that. And I think that, again, just the bill is just the beginning, and for Scotland to be a country which truly does uphold and respect children's rights, that we need to move towards wanting to respect children and young people's rights as opposed to just doing the bare minimum that we have to, is just to emphasise that.
People like me, Arden, and everybody, like all of the children and young people in the world know what it's like to be a child and young person today in this day and age with things like technology. Just wanted to point out that to adults, these especially breaches of children's rights are their statistics, they are numbers, they are stories, but to children and young people, they are our reality and they're happening every day. And if we don't have the UNCRC incorporated into law, they will continue happening for years to come.
I just think that it is our reality about like the breaches, and I really agree with that one. Like adults like probably went through this as well, like, so it just doesn't feel great when your rights aren't being respected now that like people are saying we're doing everything we can, when it doesn't feel like that when your rights are being breached.
There's a million young people in Scotland, there's a million kids at risk that we won't see change right away, but even the prospect of change is huge. In terms of changing like an entire culture to revolve around children's rights, for children to respect it, feel included, they feel a part of society and they have a voice, is amazing, and it will protect kids for years to come. You're protecting a million kids now and billions of kids in the future.
Thank you to Safiyah, one of the human rights detectives, Omima and Arden, members of Children's Parliament, and Ellie and Bo, members of the Scottish Youth Parliament.